How bad are things getting for Star Wars Outlaws? Well, we've got an update for you today. And if you read between the lines on what certain folks on Wall Street seem to be indicating, you have to wonder if they're not thinking that bankruptcy might actually be on the table. Renegade Online. Game developer Ubisoft slides amid muted reception for Star Wars Outlaws. Shares in French video game maker fell on Tuesday for a second consecutive day. Again, because people out there in the U.S. are wondering, well, how did that happen? Monday was Labor Day. Labor Day don't happen in France. The stock market was still open over there. Sluggish performance after two of its recent releases, including the long-awaited Star Wars Outlaws. The shares of Ubisoft closed 5.1% lower on Monday. We're down by 2.4% by 11:14 Greenwich Mean Time, trading at their lowest levels in nearly 10 years. Adding to their over 30% drop since the start of the year. The decline was driven by a muted reception of Outlaws released on Friday, which follows lower than expected interest for the company's free-to-play game X Defiant. Mid-cap partners analysts were looking at this. And now, you brought up, Endymion, something that J.P. Morgan said. Now, we also had one that I covered on Sunday that was reported by the Financial Times of the UK. And that was a Barclays Bank analyst. Barclays Bank is a huge investment bank, big bank in the UK. Barclays, and this is what I found interesting, Barclays suggested, unless it was a typo in that Financial Times article, which, matter of fact, let me see if I still have it here. Let me pull that up. Barclays had indicated, according to their analysis, they had originally projected, I believe, 8 million units sold. They had slashed that forecast. Here it is right here. They had slashed their forecast in Barclays to around 5 million units to be sold for Outlaws. Yeah. Now, they were projecting that for the quarter. It was 2 days later, and this is the article I'm referring to, if you hadn't seen this one yet, Endymion. This is where things really get scary. Ubisoft, here it is right here. And I don't know if you caught this. Again, we pulled the video from it. I'm trying to find it here. Here we go. Nick Dempsey at Barclays. There it is. The guidance translates into 5 million copies in the quarter. Analysts slash the number from 8 million in the quarter. Okay? And on top of that, they said that while it's true the previous iteration of Valhalla sold 13 million copies, a repeat performance may be unlikely. Shadows, set in feudal Japan, has already caused a stir, okay? And in order for Ubisoft to actually hit its guidance for these two games, given the severe underperformance of Outlaws, Ubisoft is going to have to sell 13.5 million copies of Shadows, which would be 500,000 more than Valhalla.
That's impossible, and I'll tell you why.
Yep, I know.
So Valhalla is actually Ubisoft's second best performing game of all time. Number one is Rainbow Six Siege. Valhalla made so much money for Ubisoft and was such a success story that they ended up releasing multiple expansions that it was never meant to have in the first place. That's why you had Dawn of Ragnarok, Siege of Paris, and so on. It had all these things come out for it. Shadows is nowhere near going to get what Valhalla did. And Valhalla's smart, by the way, because they actually kind of played both sides of the argument, if you will. Because they basically promoted the game with the male version of Eivor, so all the male players wanted to play it. But then they say when you play the game that the female version of Eivor is actually the canon version. And they did the same exact thing with Odyssey as well. They actually promoted that game with Alexios, but Cassandra was the main character, apparently. So, but this time they can't do that because you just play Naoe and Yasuke. There's nobody else. And I think going forward, they are never, if they survive this, I don't even know. Let's just assume they survive this. If they do, you are never going to see another dual protagonist Assassin's Creed game ever made again. Because the last time they did this was actually Syndicate with Jacob and Evie Fry. And that was actually the worst performing Assassin's Creed game. But that had less to do with the fact that it had dual protagonists and more to do with the fact that Unity was received so badly that people basically said no more to Assassin's Creed. And that's why Syndicate did so poorly. And then they brought everybody back once they made Origins, which was basically just Assassin's Creed Witcher, but not as good. And they tried to make Witcher 3 times. And then they, finally got Valhalla, which did really well. But this is going to be, I really don't see this doing well at all. And they really have no one to blame with themselves. No, no way. Beating Valhalla, no way. And remember that Valhalla came out when the PS5 and the Xbox Series X came out, which was the height of the pandemic. Right. And everybody was at home doing nothing.
Exactly.
So I bought Valhalla with my PS5. I bought it with that, Miles Morales and Demon Souls remake, right? And I 100%ed Valhalla and Odyssey and Origins because I had nothing better to do at the time. I wasn't doing YouTube. I was just at home, We're all at home during COVID, whatever. But now people are out and about. The economy's not doing as well. There's no way the Shadows will do better than Valhalla. I'd be shocked.
I agree. I don't think there is either. But it brings up the point from the guy from JP Morgan, which is what I found to be this part to be very interesting. And despite an overall, this is back to the Reuters article that came out just here, September 3rd, yesterday. Despite an overall positive reception by critics, which clearly don't matter, critics had a positive reception for The Acolyte. We know how that turned out. Star Wars Outlaws had a, quote, generally unfavorable user score of 4.9 out of 10. Quote, Star Wars Outlaws has struggled to meet our sales expectations despite positive critical reviews, JP Morgan analyst Daniel Kervin said. The game's development budget was at least 30% higher than Assassin's Creed Mirage. Got some information on that as well. Released last year, while data from video game live streaming platform Twitch suggested it was underperforming Mirage by about 15%. And we showed the other day, and I still have it over here, the numbers have not changed very much at all. Currently, Black Myth Wukong on Twitch, 61.5 thousand viewers. Star Wars Outlaws, still around 4,000 viewers. I'm sorry, 2.8. 2.8 thousand viewers on Star Wars Outlaws, 50,000 viewers on Black Myth. I hadn't refreshed it, pardon me. But still, like 20 times more people are watching, roughly, Black Myth Wukong on Twitch right now than Outlaws. These two games came out at almost exactly the same time. Here's the kicker, though. Kervin, JP Morgan's chief analyst for the sector, also lowered his sales expectations for Outlaws by 2 million units to 5.5 million units in the year through March 2025. So here we go. Barclays analysts said that they were lowering projections down to 5 million units by the end of the quarter. JP Morgan Bank has a far more dire outlook for this game, saying that it might make 5 million units by March, 6 months from now, not at the end of the quarter, at the end of September. It might not make 5 million units by the time we get to March of 25, the end of the fiscal year for Ubisoft. This is an absolute catastrophe because they're talking about this game, Star Wars Outlaws, a 30% higher budget than that of Assassin's Creed Mirage. Now, I will say this was a bit of a trick. I had to really dig and dig and dig and dig. And I could not really find much of anything on Mirage. And Endymion, I don't know if you really know, but I pulled this up from May of 2021. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which my understanding is that Mirage was a smaller scale game.
Yeah, so Valhalla. Mirage was meant to be DLC for Valhalla. And then eventually it got too ambitious because it stars a character from Baghdad that comes into Valhalla's story. His name's Basim. Yep. And Basim is the main character of Mirage. It takes place before Valhalla. There's a whole thing. I'm not going to explain it. It has to do with the whole Isu technology, like the future human stuff, whatever. Anyway, so Mirage was then made into its own game. And apparently that game actually did really well. It came out and It apparently had sale numbers close to, they said, Origins and Odyssey at launch. Keep in mind, though, that Mirage was cheaper because, again, it was meant to be DLC first. I think it came out at $50 Canadian or something like that instead of the usual 70, 80. But even then, I mean, considering the fact that it sold like, if it sold just the same as Odyssey and Origins did in their opening like month or two, that means Mirage was a big success. And I think a big reason for that also was because there was no identity politics. I mean, come on, it's in Baghdad. Like, there's no way they're gonna, put some they, them, feminist stuff in a game about like Muslims and stuff. There's no way. So that was at least, that wasn't gonna happen. So
Assassin's Creed Valhalla, you look at this, you look here, Valhalla, they're talking about Odyssey, reportedly around 500 million. Is what the total cost in for that was. And again, if you look at Odyssey and you look at Valhalla and you look at Mirage being a smaller scale, let's say it came in at 200 million, right? If Outlaws was 30% more than that, if Outlaws came in at 260, or if Mirage was 250, half of this $500 million monster, and it came in at 325, I mean, we're talking about a massive hurdle to get over. And when you compound that with the biggest marketing budget, according to Ubisoft, that they had ever made for any video game ever, which is astonishing to me.
Well, the bigger problem, I think, is just the money they're leaving on the table. Like, they're leaving a lot of money on the table with a Star Wars. Like, you think of the name Star Wars, you put that on a project, you put that on something, and you should just be able to print money at that point, because Star Wars is that kind of franchise. Like you said, they spent $4 billion. They didn't spend $4 billion on that franchise for nothing. It's that big. And so you would think, hey, we put Star Wars on this. We put, a good story around it. We put some money behind it. We should just be able to just crank out, print money, right? I mean, we're going to make our, we're going to make our budget back and then some. We're not even worried about that. So yeah, go ahead, go all in on the marketing, do whatever it is you need to do, because we're going to make all our money back. And the fact that they are struggling, and they're probably not even going to get close to 5 million sales by the time we roll around to March of next year. The game's been out for 6 months. That's insane. But it goes right back to that previous article where you were saying, well, they listen. I don't know if they're listening to, I don't know where they're getting their data from. Are they listening to the critics that are loving this and say, oh, it's got this despite positive critic reviews? When are they going to start listening to the fans? When are they going to start listening to the customers and the people that are actually going to buy the product? Because guess what? Those critics, they're not going to be buying those 5.5 million copies of Star Wars Outlaws, okay? It's going to be the hardcore, the fans, okay? The people that are going to come out of their pocket. They love the franchise, or they love these types of games, and this is why they're buying it, but they're not listening to those people. Pay attention to what the users, or the what I'm thinking of, the audience. Listen to the audience reviews. Forget the critic, or the critics are the critics. We know the critics are going to be, whatever. Listen to the paying customer for once. And they don't seem to understand that. And I don't know how long we're going to be going through this when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to, all of this stuff. They have not listened to the hardcore fans for I don't know how long. And it's just getting to the point where it's hilarious at this point. Like, wow, here's a Star Wars game, and it's underperforming to this degree, 55% lower than Jedi Survivor. Like, you got to be kidding me, guys. This is wild, man. And it's like they just don't learn.
And it's wild, too, when you think about it, because when Disney first bought Star Wars, one of the first games they released under their new, ownership, I guess you could say, was Star Wars Battlefront. And Battlefront was pretty bare bones. People remember when that first one came out, but it came out during the hype of those movies when they were first coming out, too. And I think the first Star Wars Battlefront, people can probably correct me, but I think it sold 10, 11, 12 million in its first fall opening release, whatever it is. It made a lot of money. And this, it just goes to show you that the apathy of Star Wars has basically taken root. No one cares anymore.
Yeah. It's very, very deep. Yeah,
it makes me worry that if and I think really what it comes down to is people can say it's the ugly character, which is a big reason, but I think the major reason here is simply because it's Ubisoft. Everybody knows that Ubisoft's name is no longer tied to quality. It just isn't. All of their franchises are just homogenous. They all feel and look exactly the same. You look at the Division, you look at Ghost Recon Wildlands, look at Watch Dogs, look at Assassin's Creed even. They all have this similar identity, this similar concept to all of them. Like, you climb around, it's always third person. There's some kind of cover-based shooting or stealthing around and take out guys from behind that have terrible AI. Every single game is like that. I remember I tried X Defiant because my buddy really wanted me to try it, and I really didn't want to play it. It was like, let's just try it and see if it's fine. So I try X Defiant. It's like a poor man's Call of Duty with a bunch of Ubisoft mascots in it, and it's awful. And I'm like, and I'm not surprised that game's failing too, because everything they make is just painfully generic. Everything.
So in February, Yves Guillemot talks about how, hey, we're coming out of the funk, right? We're coming back from the doldrums. This is the beginning of our turnaround, beginning of our recovery. And to kind of set that up, like we talked about Sunday, this is what he is referring to. If you look back here, all right, this is where in 2021 Ubisoft was $83 a share. Yeah. So if we look here, okay, in 2023, January of 2023, they hit $19. So when we get to February over here of 2024, right about there, February 12th, okay, $25 a share. That was after that February 8th earnings call. Hey, this is the beginning of our recovery. So let me bring this down to year to date. So February 7th, it's at 19. They have their earnings call. Hey, we're going to turn things around. This is coming. We got Outlaws. We got Shadows. Boom. Ubisoft jumps the following day of trading from 19 to about 24, 25 midday. So, I mean, literally in a day, it jumps, or within the next week, it jumps about 20%, which is a huge 1 week move for a stock. The following day, it jumped tremendously. 19, 22, 23, 24. Okay. Then some reality started setting in. All right. We get all the way out here to July, that next earnings call that we set around July 19th, right? So here we go. We're right here, July 19th, 18th, 22.50. So it's still floating up there. They had that earnings call. Look at what's happened since then. And then, of course, right here, let's go here. August 29th. It's at $17. And then Outlaws came out, and now we're at $15.54.
And what was it at the highest? 80 something?
83 back in 21.
Damn.
Yeah.
That makes sense. It's right after Valhalla.
That's it. Right after Valhalla. That's it.
Because Valhalla did really, really well.
Yeah.
That's kind of what they want. You look at all their games too. Not only are a lot of Ubisoft games just homogeneously the same in terms of how they play and stuff, they're all open world for the most part, or they're massively multiplayer, whatever games. And they all have cash shops. Every single last one of them. Even the single player games. Like even Mirage, which I said was 50 at launch, whatever. It still had a cash shop, Even Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, which was 40 at launch, they still had microtransactions and stuff available. They always do. And I bet you so much that once Shadows comes out, it's the same thing. I actually don't even know if Outlaws has a cash shop, but if it does, I wouldn't be surprised. Because I haven't played it, obviously, so I don't want to give them money for it.
It seems like a lot of people don't want to pony up the money for that.
Make sure you're subscribed to Valiant Renegade and join us every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern for the live show.